Hi, it's Andy from Cytomic. Welcome to the future of circuit modelling, where creamy analog tone fuses with the power of digital control to become the Scream, the ultimate tube screamer emulation and Cytomic's most detailed plugin yet. Not only is the classic tone of the original analog pedal more accurately modelled than any other plugin to date, but since every parameter of every component can be modified, the Scream is a true chameleon. It can become any popular tube screamer variant you want with ease. It can add body and warmth to vocals, add grit to drums, and turn squeaks from a 303 into roars. It can even retract its claws and become a refined tool that adds the most subtle of high-quality harmonics to round out a mix and become a bus-warming powerhouse. In this video, we'll cover the main features of the Scream. We'll look at the gain staging, what the main controls do, how to easily modify and randomize the components, and how to edit values in the schematic view. If you're interested in hearing just how accurate the Scream is, I've gone through this in another video, and, spoiler alert if you haven't seen that one yet, it's bang on. In this video, we'll concentrate on how best to use the Scream in a production setting and how to tailor the pedal for specific situations. I've set up a project with a few different sound sources so we can put the Scream through its paces. I've got a couple of different guitar sounds, a 303 synth line, some drums, and a test signal so we can look at some bus warming harmonics later on. But let's start with some straight up distortion. I'll add the Scream to the track and switch it into bypass mode and have a listen to the dry sound. All right, let's initialize the preset by clicking in the middle and selecting Initialize Preset, and switch the Scream back on and have a listen to that. And as you can hear there, the sound's already starting to be overdriven. And this is because the signal level is quite hot here. A regular guitar wouldn't quite be this loud going into the pedal if you were plugging it in straight away into the analog pedal. So I recommend if you want to reproduce what the guitar tone would be like, then you should use this pre-gain to lower the gain by about 8 dB and then gain up with the post about 8 dB. And now we can have another listen to that. And you can hear that's a lot cleaner, but let's use the AB functionality where you can switch between two presets to listen while the loop's playing, so we can have another listen to that. So let's switch to preset B, initialize that preset, and press play, and then I'll click on the AB button to swap between them. So there you can hear that with the correct gain staging, it's a lot cleaner and it's a little bit louder as well. So we don't have to gain it all the way back up to 8 dB if you wanted to AB between the two to compare them. But let's go with preset A, and I'll slowly increase the drive. So as we increase the drive, we'll then lower the level to maintain a similar kind of overall volume, and then we can switch the tone. We can increase to make it brighter or decrease to make it duller using the tone knob. We can double click on a knob and enter a numeric value. And now let's play with the tone knob. Also, we can reset the knobs to the default position on Mac if we hold the Option and then click, or on Windows if we hold Command and then click, it'll reset the knobs back to their default. The last controls to cover on the main user interface are the active button, the voltage, bias, and the mod switch. So let's start with the active button. This enables the overdrive part of the circuit. So when switched off, there's a bypass action happening, but it's not a true bypass. There is an input buffer, some DC blocking filters, and an output buffer still in the signal chain, which is exactly what happens on the pedal itself, which is useful for other drive applications. So let's switch the pedal back on and have a listen to lowering the voltage and changing the bias. Now the pedal runs off a battery, which is 9 volts, and then it has to have a signal somewhere wobbling up and down between 0 and 9 volts, and that's what the bias does. If you increase the bias, then it pushes the circuit into asymmetric clipping by clipping off the top side of the waveform before the bottom, and then vice versa on the bottom if you lower the bias. So let's have a listen to that. One thing we can do is leave this preset so we can switch between it and listen to what the voltage changes sound like. So let's copy this preset to from A to B, and then when we click up here, we're switching A to B. And now let's lower the voltage. Now, for more accurate emulation, switch on the HD mode, and it will simulate how the breakup of the low voltage pedal sounds a bit more accurately. And let's switch between the two. To change the values, you can also use the scroll wheel. So let's do that. Raise the bias up to the top side. That's normal, and that's with the bias raised. And now we'll lower the bias. So that's with the bias too low, and the regular drive sound. Okay, let's reset those. And the last control is the mod control. And for that, let's switch over to the next example here. And we'll bypass the pedal. And here's the dry sound. And we'll switch back on the pedal, and now we'll enable this button down here, which is the mods button. Now in here are quick edit kind of knobs so that you can change the most impactful tone controls and drive settings possible. And there are 2 of these mod slots switched up, and you can automate in your project between them. So unlike the A and the B, this is more like mods are done on a pedal, where there's a switch and the drive, tone and voltage and everything are shared between the 2 mods. If you look at the signal flow, which I'll pop up on the screen now, you'll see that there's a path which goes around for the bypass, which we've covered before, but then in the drive section there's also a dry path that gets added to the driven path, and the drive knob only affects one side of that, around the negative feedback loop of the drive op amp. And in there is a high pass filter and a low pass filter, and then the signal gets driven and then added to the dry, which then gets low passed and then put through the tone control and then through the level fader and then back out to the output buffer. what we can do is adjust with this knob here that high pass filter. So we can either, in the default setting, it's at 720 Hertz. So if you hover, you can see those settings. But if the typical mod is to lower it down and distort more of the bass of the signal. So let's listen to that. So that's adding in a bit more bass. And even more. And that's pretty much full bass now. Now, I think a little bit more bass sounds good on this sound, but this control can be used to tailor the signal for a bass guitar where you've got a lot more bassy frequencies that you want to distort, so you can adjust this one. Now, the next major thing that is important is the actual drive diodes themselves. So this is, if you click in the center here, you can pick from a selection of different diodes, silicon, germanium, LEDs, and such like. So let's, and you can, there's one diode that is on the top and one diode which is on the bottom. And then you can also change how many diodes are in series. The more diodes in series, the softening of the drive. So it takes longer for the voltage to build up across multiple diodes before it starts clipping in full. And I've even got a half a diode, so you can make it even more severe than you could with a real diode. And one easy way to get symmetric sounds is to either have two different diodes in action. And let's have a listen to that. We'll increase the tone a little bit, make it a bit brighter. But we can actually add two diodes to one side. That makes the signal a little bit louder, and it's softening the clipping on one side versus the other to make a more asymmetrical sound. The remaining controls up here, this one is the drive low pass filter, which interacts with the clipping diodes. Now, this low pass is a dynamic one because as you change the drive knob, it changes the cutoff of that filter. And in the original circuit, this is a way that when you have the drive at maximum, it actually sounds a bit smoother because it brings that down to from 50 kilohertz, which you wouldn't even hear any low passing happening, right down to 6 kilohertz, where it's very much just taking the edge off the signal. But we can adjust that here to whatever we want. But this one here, instead of using the tone knob, another thing that you can do, so reset that, is increase the cutoff of the low pass filter that comes after the drive and the drive that's summed with the dry signal. There, I've just increased it. You can hear it a little bit brighter. So then you might want to take the tone and just lower that down a bit. The tone is a shelving filter, so it's a bit more gentle than a straight low pass, which is what happens with the post low pass filter here. Okay, so now this is all on mod slot 1, and we still have another mod slot, so we can use this as a way to A/B between two different mods. And if you right click here, there's a few more options as well. We can initialize the mod slot, clear the undo. As you saw along here, dots start appearing, and this is a mod explorer, so you can roll back to right where you started or back up to where we are now with that bar. But if you right click here, you can click clear mod undo, and that will clear that away and just keep what you've got. Now you can copy between the mod slots here, and you can limit it to just loading from the preset file mod slot 1 or mod slot 2, and that'll get loaded into the currently selected mod slot. So let's have a listen. And the mod, as I said before, the mod control can be automated in your song. So this way you can quickly switch between two different sets of mods with the same plugin. So there's the stock, and there's the mod that we dialed in. Now the last control here is the drive low pass. So let's reset the tone, and then instead of using that to dull the sound off, we can get a slightly different low passing with the drive low pass. Now what happens when a low pass filter is not buffered from the diodes that are doing the clipping is that there's interaction between the filtering and the diodes, and that's quite a pleasing sound. So let's have a listen to that. So that's quite bright. And now I'll lower the drive low pass. And now AB to the default sound. Comparing those two sounds, because all the other knobs are shared, the level was a bit different. So let's copy from A to B again, and then match the volume a bit on mod slot 2. There you can hear quite a fuller sound because we adjusted the drive high pass to be a bit lower, and we adjusted a few of the other settings. Let's move on to the randomization page now. I'll do a factory reset and increase the drive and start playing with these controls. So we have a randomize button, a mutate button, and then some depth faders to apply how much the randomization that we generate from the two buttons applies to the sound. Let's do it in mono to start with. And I'll exaggerate it by bringing it up to 100%. Each time we randomize, we get an undo point. So the randomize button takes the existing set of values for all of the parameters and then generates a random number and then applies that to get a new value. So what we can do is explore here, and each time we press randomize, it still takes the same base values and generates a new random set from it. So that's a really easy way to get some subtle variations or drastic variations based on the same starting point. So that's sounding good there. So what we can now do to explore further from this starting point is press the mutate button once. And then we can have a listen to some stereo variations. So that's sounding quite good there. And then if we wanted, we could randomize and mutate further from there. Now what may be needed, if you randomize and the sound is panned a little bit like that, then you may need to add a pan control to bring it back to more to the center. Or just keep on clicking until it kind of centers itself and you like the sound. So the reason that a pan control is needed is, and that's only kind of a band-aid on top of what's going on, because under the hood, depending on this input signal level and the dynamics of the signal, there's multiple different gains going on, which will subtly shift the stereo image a little bit as it pushes into drive or it goes through a different cutoff of some of the filtering. So it'll never be perfectly panned, and it'll always be kind of wide in stereo. So if you don't want that natural kind of analog variation you need to drag this stereo slider all the way down. And also, one other little tip is that once you've generated stereo randomness, with the mutate button will write that as the base point, so that then even if you scale back the stereo fader, it'll still stay in stereo. So you have to watch out for using the mutate button when you've already applied stereo randomization. Next up, let's use the Scream to process a 303 synthesizer loop, and we'll add a lot of drive and clipping to this. So first, let's have a listen to the loop that's dry. And we'll do an initialize of the preset. We'll switch on HD mode and start manipulating things. Now what we'll do for this is go into the schematic editor, which is an advanced view that shows every single component in the circuit and allows you to hover over and then click on the component and then edit a value. Now in the drive section here, we've got the two main clipping diodes, and when you pick one of the diodes from the menus, it is actually changing all these values here for the different diode. We'll concentrate on the op-amp itself, and in particular the slew rate limiting, which is a type of distortion, and also these two positive and negative VLIM offsets. These clip the output voltages of the op-amp and prevent it going past the power rails, but we can manipulate the offsets here and make it clip earlier to get not just the drive side, but also the dry side of the signal clipping, which adds a little bit of a different character. So let's have a listen to the slew rate limiting first of all. We'll turn the tone up to full, and then change this to around 10 millivolts, and you can hear some crunchiness being added in there. So let's have a listen to what that sounded like before. And there it is back again. Now we'll change these to about 4 each. You can hear it clipping already. Let's make that one 3.5. And now increase the pre-gain to really start pushing into all of that clipping. And we haven't even touched the main drive knob yet, but we can also add that. Bring the tone back a little bit, and then we can bring in more of the low frequencies here. Alright, there we go. Now we're starting to get some real grit and growl. So the dry signal. And the driven signal. Next up, let's have a listen to a bus warming application. So come up to the preset menu and load wide drive. The other drives will be like a nonlinear shelving EQ at different frequencies, but we'll just boost the entire signal. Let's have a listen to the, actually we'll switch over and look at the harmonics first. This is a sine wave of 400 Hertz, and I'll bring the spectrum analyzer up. and we'll look at the harmonics. So here we have the fundamental of 400 Hertz. Then we have the second order harmonic at about -64 dB, and the third order harmonic at -84 dB. Now we can change the harmonic balance here that we're adding via the saturation, and we can do that by either lowering the voltage from 18 volts, which is quite clean, and you can see some more harmonics coming in already. Every time there's a click, it's the loop resetting back to the start. So let's bring that back down to 9 volts, and you can see there's quite a bit more drive already. Bring that back up to 18, and let's have a look at increasing the drive knob. You can see the harmonics changing, and we're getting these third order harmonics come in here. Now with the drive knob, it does add a bit of gain, so then you need to use the post to bring it back a bit. So there is a nice set of harmonics, quite strong. So we'll exaggerate it a bit for this example, and let's switch back to the actual audio loop. Reset the volume, and we'll bypass the scream and have a listen to the dry loop. So this is a sample with a lot of room. So what we'll do is try and add some sparkle to the room, and also widen the stereo field a little bit with some stereo randomization. So that's the dry, and here's the wet. And it's very subtle, it's very clean. Let's exaggerate it a bit more. There it is. And now let's do some stereo randomization. So we'll exaggerate that as well, and we'll click the randomize button. And there, that's a nice widening kind of effect without changing the stereo field too much. We'll maybe just bring that back a little bit, and we'll listen to it clean again. There, it's bypassed, and back in action. So once you've got a sound that you're happy with, you can kind of tone it down a bit as needed. Now the tone knob in this application becomes a clean shelving filter. So the signal is wide open, there's no low pass filtering going on, but you can still add some tonal variation with the tone knob as a shelving filter. Now when you do the randomization, what happens is in this view, every time that you change, you can see that the numbers are updated in here. If there's a particular value of a stereo value that, so for example, the level may be, see how it's 88 and 113. If we want to center the gain of this a bit, we could set both of those to 100K, and that will help with the panning back into the middle a bit better. But there will be different subtle stereo variations due to all of the parameters, every single one having some kind of stereo aspect to it, which is what happens in a natural circuit when you have component variation. The left and the right won't be perfectly matched. And what happens then is, as there's dynamics to the signal, everything will change slightly. So the drive will engage slightly differently. The high pass and low pass filters are slightly different. The potentiometers have different values for the left and right. So everything has a little bit of a stereo spread and naturalness to it, which opens the stereo image. Let's have one final listen. So that's engaged and bypassed. And while we're here on these kind of high quality presets, so you can for this as well, engage the HD button, which will increase the CPU usage slightly and provide a more detailed set of modeling and that doesn't compromise on the CPU for the quality. And there's also the oversampling amount, so I'll quickly talk about that. Now, when you click on this menu, the first thing you can see is HD render, which will automatically switch to the HD mode when you do a render, which is really useful if you want to save CPU otherwise. And up at the top, you can see the latency that's being generated because of the oversampling. What we can do, if you don't want any latency, is switch the real-time and render oversampling amounts to 1. And then you can see there's no latency. So in a DAW, you're not allowed to, the plugin can't change the latency it generates between real-time and render, so it always has to introduce the same latency, which is, so if you have a higher rate for render, then you will have latency, even though you don't need it for real-time. So if you want to get rid of that, set them both to 1, and then later on, if you want to change it, you can change it, and then at the bottom there is copy to others, so you can copy these settings to every single other instance to get the higher quality render and have 0 latency while you're mixing and doing other things. At the top of here also, as is covered in the manual, there are plots for all of these, but you've got linear phase, intermediate and minimum phase for both the up and down sampling independently. Most of the time you can just leave them on the default settings or on linear phase and that'll be fine, but if you have a specific situation you want to tackle, then these can be useful to lower the latency that you get while still having some sort of oversampling. Well, that wraps it up for this video. We've covered all the main controls and how to use them, including preset management, swapping between the A and B presets, the mod slots, the main drive knobs, gain staging, voltage, and the mods panel, the randomization, and also the schematic editor. So I hope that's helped people get more out of the Scream than they would have before. And I hope you can appreciate the level of detail that's going into all of the modeling and the sheer flexibility that's on offer here to sculpt and process anything that you want.